Pleased to welcome back our good friend Ashlee Stephenson. She is the president of AxAdvocacy and a longtime Republican strategist. Thanks again for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Happy to be here.
I know you were listening to Michael Steele just a moment ago, and of course the president in a very somber speech at the outset talking about the war in Iran, the death of now 4 service members, then pivoting to talk about the East Wing of the White House, the draperies, and the ballroom. Was that appropriate?
Well, maybe you or I, Steve, or other presidents would have handled it differently. This is not a traditional presidency. We all know that with President Trump, and it's not as though he just stepped on the scene. He's been with us for over a decade when he first became a candidate in 2015. And we know that he has the mental flexibility, if you will, to quickly move from topic to topic, no matter the setting, no matter the scenario, no matter the circumstances. And I think what we saw earlier today is another example of that, where perhaps I would have handled it differently or given advice to handle it differently. The president does things on his terms. And what I will tell you is, without a doubt, the press will be running wild with this, I think, and it will just be a sideshow story where the topic of the day is much more serious of everything that's happening overseas. But it will certainly give another reason for those who already dislike the Trump administration to attack him and spend a lot of oxygen on whether he should or should not have done that. I don't think he personally should have. This president does what he wants to. He's not conventional, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. That's the big takeaway.
And you've been very clear not defending what he said, but I just wonder those 4 family members, or those family members that lost the 4 service members, how it makes them feel, because he was showing empathy and just instantaneously pivots to this pet project that he has that's going to cost about $400 million. Again, just final thoughts on that.
Well, more than one thing can be true at once, Steve. And I think that it is completely possible and human to have a ton of empathy and be very generous in your remarks and what you do behind the scenes for those families who've lost somebody, and at the same time to, within a matter of moments. And again, this is not atypical at all for this presidency to pivot to the next topic at hand. Clearly, what's often top of mind for him are these renovations, whether it's with the East Wing or some of the other things that this administration is interested in doing in Washington, the golf courses, the Arc de Triomphe, as they've called it. So this is not out of nature for him. And again, would you have I done it this way? Probably not. And I think that multiple things can be true. He can have empathy. He can make those phone calls and give those remarks, and then he can quickly flip the channel to the next thing that's front of mind for him.
So let's turn to politics. We invited you on to talk about, among other things, the race tomorrow in Texas and a fascinating Republican primary. There's a new poll out from Emerson College that shows the Attorney General, Republican Ken Paxton, at 40%, John Cornyn at 36%, Congressman Wesley Hunt at 17%. So this will very likely, almost certainly, head into a runoff. What are your thoughts leading into tomorrow's primary in Texas and what the runoff over the next 10 weeks will look like?
Sure. Well, gosh, Steve, there's been so much written about this. It's really taken up, I think, a lot of the oxygen in the room, attention to both sides of the partisanship, whether you're looking at the Republican race, which is just so interesting, and then, of course, on the Democratic side, I like to, in addition to the polls, being a pollster, go look at the betting markets. And you see today that it looks like on Polymarket, 75% give Tallarico the most likely chance of winning. On the Republican side of the ledger, it's 89% for Paxton. So when you're just being inundated, as we are with these public polls, some of which you have to question are really right or not, especially with early voting, you always want to know if the samples are excluding early voting from them before you really take them and say this is what's going to happen to predict an outcome. So that's a big question to flag. But I think the betting markets tell us what's most likely to happen, who's going to come out on top. And I would anticipate that, of course, on the Republican side, it does not look like anybody's going to hit 50. What we do know is that Wesley Hunt is unlikely to make the runoff. He's really had a pretty low ceiling. He's struggled to get above, 15, 17%. Frankly, that might be the highest that we've seen him. I would anticipate Paxton ends up somewhere low to mid 40s. Potentially Senator Cornyn just right behind him. It could even be within a point or two. And we know that then we have a pretty long 10 weeks in that runoff where Senator Cornyn has been clear, as he was on 60 Minutes last night, saying that it's going to only get more aggressive from here. So Texans, they might be sick of the television ads and the yard signs, but they're in for it for at least another 10 weeks or so.
Bitter and very expensive, no doubt about that. So let me put a hypothetical. And again, we don't know what will happen in the runoff. It could be Ken Paxton, it could be John Cornyn. But if it is, as many people are predicting on those betting markets, as you pointed out, James Tallarico, by the way, in the new Emerson College poll, 52%, Jasmine Crockett at 47%. Again, it's one poll, one snapshot. We'll look at the actual numbers when they come in tomorrow and Wednesday. But hypothetically, Tallarico versus Paxton. What does that look like in the fall?
Well, today on the betting markets on Kalshi, that's another one in addition to
you and the betting markets.
This is where I'm going, Steve. When the polls start to just not make sense or there's too many, throw the betting markets into the cocktail to really try to get smart and have a hot take. So Kalshi's telling us that 65% think that Republicans will win next fall, 35% for Democrats. Without a doubt, it would be a very interesting race no matter who the nominees are on each side. So let's get really clear on that. This is going to be fascinating for a lot of reasons. As Texas continues to change and become more diverse, there's a lot of new movers. It's a good reminder that in 2020, when Cornyn was last reelected, several million new Texans have moved into the state. A lot of people, as we know, heading for the exits from places like California. So your guess is as good as mine if these are more likely to be Republican voters or Democrats, or certainly some mix thereof. But look, it could potentially be a competitive race. I come back to this. Governor Abbott's up. You can take unlimited money on the corporate side and Texas politics statewide for the governor's race. I can't imagine that Governor Abbott, who's been so wildly successful as both a leader and certainly a politician, is going to allow the entirety of the ticket to split or not go all the way of red. And that's something that has surprised me, is not getting more coverage or being written about more, because when Abbott wins again, he's going to want to operate from a position of strength, as he always has and he always will. And that means ensuring that all those state legislative races work out in his favor. A couple of other wild cards to be mindful of is the mid-decade redistricting in Texas too, Steve, which, as you know, further complicates this because these districts don't look easily Republican. Of course, that was the hope. But in what could be a tough year, you just never know what's going to happen. So we're in for a lot of coverage on Texas that will not end tomorrow. It won't end in 10 weeks. It's going to take us all the way to the November general election. Why is that? Well, Democrats desperately want to start to flip this state to make it blue for an electoral college advantage. Republicans know that they need to hang on to it because it doesn't look like a California, for example, is going to come back their way anytime soon. So this will be a political science textbook, if you will, of primaries, runoffs, and then a really big general election.
And then, of course, here in the D.C. area, Ashlee, you and I have been inundated with ads in Virginia to try to change the way that the congressional maps are drawn in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is an effort to help the Democrats in reaction to what's happening in Texas. Very quickly, what's going to happen in Virginia?
Well, we know that the courts have been involved in this, Steve, and I continue to think that that's where this ultimately may lie, despite some of the other things that are going to happen at the ballot box, et cetera. And there's a lot, as you said, being spent now to try to persuade Virginians to feel one way or the other about it. But the courts have indicated that they will continue to be involved in this. And that we've not seen the last page in this book yet. So your guess is probably as good as mine as where we end up here. But this mid-decade redistricting battle was not on my bingo card for 2025 and 2026. Maybe it should have been. But I think at the end of the day, we probably come out somewhere closer to a draw overall than being able to really argue that it hugely benefited one party over the other. The big loss here is for the constituents and the elected officials who need to focus on governing and instead are forced to be dealing with this.
When does Ashlee Rich Stephenson run for office?
I don't know. It's never been top of mind. I have too much fun doing this, Steve. I don't know that I could talk so bluntly, but thanks for asking.
Well, we appreciate your expertise, but we also appreciate your candor and not just the normal GOP spin, but calling it as you see them. So we appreciate that so very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Ashlee Rich Stephenson, she is the president of AxAdvocacy and a longtime Republican strategist. Let's turn to reaction here in Washington to the war in Iran, the mission that began early morning on Saturday. We were on the